Hi everybody, Dana Sparks, and this week's contract tip has to do with multiple offers. So let's back up. Before we even get to the multiple offer stage, anytime a seller receives an offer on their listing, they have the option of what they choose to do. The seller can accept the terms as they are with no changes and accept it prior to the expiration of the time limit and send that back to the buyer. The other thing that a seller can do is the seller can make a counter offer and counter some of the terms that came in the original offer and send that back and begin the negotiations. The third thing a seller can do is a seller can just let that offer expire. If there's a time limit on it, they can just not respond at all and let that time limit expire. Or the fourth thing they can do is the seller can just outright reject that offer. If the seller is going to accept the offer as is with no changes prior to the expiration of the time limit, they obviously sign that and send it back. If the offer is going to make a counter offer, then obviously the seller prepares a counter offer form, signs it, sends it back. If the seller is going to reject the offer, then the seller needs to send a notification back to the buyer that they are rejecting the offer outright. If the seller is just going to let the time limit of the offer expire, then there's nothing that the seller has to do. So those are just what a seller can do upon receipt of an offer on their listing. So now let's step into multiple offers. So a lot of times what we hear of is highest and best, highest and best. Well, highest and best isn't always the appropriate course of action for a seller. Sometimes the highest amount of money isn't necessarily what the seller needs. It's not necessarily the best terms. And typically, if a seller goes back to multiple buyers asking for highest and best, that typically broadcasts that they want a better price, or that's what the buyer ends up interpreting, is that they need a better price. But let's say, for example, you have a short sale listing that needs some repairs, and let's say, for example, that you have an owner-occupant offer getting an FHA loan, and let's say that you have perhaps an investor offer paying cash, or even an owner-occupant offer paying cash that isn't going to ask for repairs. So what's in the seller's best interest in that situation potentially could be the terms of the offer, not necessarily the highest price, but the one, number one, calling for the fewest, if any, amount of repairs, and number two, FHA guidelines, or VA guidelines for that matter, probably would be in the seller's best interest in that situation. So a cash offer with no repairs, even if it was a lower price than the owner-occupied offer with an FHA insured loan, might not be the best for that seller. So in that situation, quote-unquote highest and best isn't necessarily the best situation. Additionally, there are specific ways that a seller, if you are going to counter back multiple, if you do receive multiple offers and you are going to broadcast that out to the buyers, there are specific ways you need to do that. Back with the highest and best, if a seller is going to do that, you need to, and I don't think that's necessarily the best way, but you need to send a lot of agents send it as an email. I strongly suggest you use the notification form in both sets of contract packages, and have the seller send a notification back to all of the buyers that have an offer on the table at the time. And you would use verbiage such as, regarding the property located at blank, and fill in the property address, the seller has received multiple offers. Please have the buyer present their highest and best offer by the deadline of blank time on blank day and date. After the deadline, the seller will address all offers and make a decision. A perhaps better way to do it is for the seller to make multiple counter offers. And in the GAR form, you're going to use the counteroffer form, and you're going to use the special stipulation 632, multiple counter offers. And I'll read that to you, and I'm going to link the verbiage below. This counteroffer is being made to more than one prospective buyer. Notwithstanding any provision to the contrary contained elsewhere in this counteroffer or in the original offer, acceptance of this counteroffer will not create an enforceable contract between buyer and seller herein unless it is accepted and delivered back to the seller prior to the following: 1, the time limit of the counteroffer, and 2, prior to the acceptance and delivery back to seller of this counteroffer by any other prospective buyer to whom this counteroffer has been made. This counteroffer may only be accepted in writing, delivered to seller's listing agent, seller's listing broker by facsimile at the following number. And this offer allows for a fax number. Notice to seller's listing broker shall be deemed to be notice to the seller. Listing broker shall maintain a list of prospective buyers and determine which prospective buyer, if any, is the first to accept and deliver back to seller this counteroffer. All parties agree that the determination of the listing broker in this regard shall be final and binding upon the seller and all prospective buyers. Upon receipt by the listing broker of the first acceptance of this counteroffer, meeting the terms and conditions specified above, the listing broker shall promptly notify said buyer that a binding agreement has been formed between said buyer and seller. The listing broker shall also promptly notify the other prospective buyers that a binding agreement has been formed with another party. Good attempt, but this still has some issues. It puts you as the agent on the clock, and you have to be extremely diligent, because if the seller creates a counteroffer back to multiple buyers, even including this special stipulation on the counteroffer form, if the seller has put a time limit on that counteroffer back, then you potentially run into issues if you get it back from one buyer and before you withdraw that counteroffer for the other. And I'm assuming that this special stipulation will counteract that with an open counteroffer back to multiple buyers. The RE forms also has a special stipulation regarding counteroffers sent to multiple parties, and that's what that one's called, counteroffer sent to multiple parties. And that one states, it is understood and agreed that the seller is in negotiations with other potential buyers and that a counteroffer is being made to one or more potential buyers. Further, it is understood and agreed that acceptance of this counteroffer by buyer will not create an enforceable contract between the buyer and the seller until the seller delivers to buyer and or buyer's broker notice of the seller's final acceptance. The listing broker shall promptly notify any other offerers at the time that an accepted agreement has been formed and offer other offers an opportunity, and has set an offer to the other offers an opportunity to enter into a backup agreement. So again, I guess we're getting into the concept of binding agreement. So the seller makes a counteroffer back to multiple buyers using the special stipulations provided as I just read. The buyer or buyers will send back an acceptance. You still don't have binding until the seller then notifies the buyer of which one was the actual binding agreement date. And again, even if a seller gets multiple offers on a property, a seller does not need to call for highest and best. A seller does not need to make multiple counteroffers back. It is completely the seller's choice how the seller chooses to respond to the offers that have been sent forth. Even with multiple offers, a seller can choose one and go binding on one and reject the others, or offer, counter back the offers with a backup contingency form, or the seller can call for highest and best, call for multiple, respond back with multiple counteroffers, or the seller can just negotiate with one of the offers on the table. So just a few issues to bring to your attention. Make sure you use the proper forms: notification form, counteroffer form, the special stipulations provided for you in both the RE package and the GAR package, and the notice to reject the offer or the counteroffer. If you're in FMLS, then you can use the form F-144, which is the notice to reject offer or counteroffer. If you're in the RE forms, just use the notification form. Thank you again for watching. I'm Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.